Hello everyone, and welcome once again to Python programming from 0 to 1. I'm your host, Mr. Incongruous, and I am very excited to be here. And there's one bit of news I wanted to share with you that I've been checking on what are the good habits for YouTuber wannabes like myself, and one of the things they said is very positive is to have a precise streaming schedule or a precise schedule for your videos. In my case, that schedule will be streaming twice a week. One will be on Mondays at 7 p.m. Pacific time. The other will be on Thursdays at 7 p.m. Pacific time. So in case you think my rambling is something you would like to hear more about, feel free to join me at those times. I'll be broadcasting live. So the Monday streams will be all about solving programming exercises. I think we still can go one or two sessions with basic exercises as people start getting acquainted with the documents on the 0 to 1 program that you can download on the Google Drive on the description below. And on Thursdays we'll start a new section which will be about creating a new project, I think a medium-sized project, from scratch. So the idea here will be to show you how to start thinking in order to create bigger programs than what we are used to. So what we have done here is to create one or two functions that interact with each other, or create a list and a few loops to modify that list and return a result, but we haven't really gone into larger programs that might need 2 or 3 or 4 files to get everything together in a reasonable way. Now, if you like this idea, please leave a comment down below. I will be happy to read all of them and reply as well. As to, is there something in particular you'd like to see? I was thinking maybe a very small agenda or telephone directory where you can insert the contact information of people, and it'll display on the screen something similar, but adding a very small, very basic login screen. Perhaps it could be a document edition system where you create some templates and where you add the information, and then it creates a standard letter or document that could be exciting as well, and it would help us get into importing and installing libraries from outside Python, which is something we haven't seen yet. The possibilities are endless. I still haven't made a decision, so if you want to know about that, or there's something that calls your attention, just let me know, and we'll decide on Thursday. Now, let's get to business. We have been solving Python exercises these past few streams, and today won't be the exception. Probably next week it'll be the same, and then we'll move on to intermediate level exercises. But it will all depend on how things move. Now let's get to it. I already have a Firefox window open, Last week we got up to number 7. Write a Python program to accept a file name from the user and print the extension of that, which turned out to be much simpler than what I thought, and their solution turned out to be much better than what I came with. But it's okay that it's a reminder that our solutions aren't the only solutions, and that there's always room for improvement. Okay, we open our friendly Python window, exercises.py, edit with idle. Here we are. Just let me adjust this a bit, and let's go. Number 8. Write a Python program to display the first and last colors from the following list. Color list equals red, green, white, black. Okay. This one shouldn't be difficult because we already know how indexing works in Python. We know that it goes from 0 up until the length of the list or the string or the sequence minus 1. So here we have 0, 1, 2, 3, and we also know that we can count backwards, so by using a negative index number. So it would be minus 1, minus 2, minus 3, and minus 4. Now, what we can do, let's solve the exercise first. Just print color list index 0, which would be the first element. Then we print color list index position 3, which is the last one. We're going from least complexity to most complexity, from less complex to more complex. In case you haven't noticed, English isn't my native language, plus I get very nervous still when in front of a camera, so please stay with me and eventually I'll get better. Now we save, we execute, and we get red and black. This is the first solution. Now what happens if we don't know the length of the list? If it's a variable length, what we can do is, we know that the first element will always be 0, but the last we don't know. We can just go with minus 1. We save, we execute, and it's the same, minus 1. At other points in our programming career, we might want to always get a certain an element in a given position of a list, but we don't know exactly which one. It could be that the list may have 3 or 5 or 7 or 9 elements, and we know that we want the second to last. If that's the case, we can just go with minus 3, or what we could do is use the length of our list as a starting point and work with that, using it as an index. we know that to get the length or the number of elements within a string or a list, we must use the function len, and that will, we print it, and that will give us the amount of elements within that list. So the length of color list is 4. So what we can do here is use that as a variable, and instead of using -1, we can say length of color list. If we do this, it'll throw an error, list index out of range, because Python counts from 0, 0, 1, 2, 3. Then what we need to do is to say this is the position of the length of the list -1, and we get the result we wanted. This is overkill for an exercise like this, which is quite simple, but as I mentioned, in the future, when you need to do more complex operations with lists and strings and so on, this could be really helpful. Let's move on to the next one then. Next exercise. Write a Python program to display the examination schedule. Extract the date from exam_st_date. Okay, this is a tuple, which is very similar to a list, only it's not mutable. We can't add or remove elements from it, and we need to format it in a particular way. We don't know if these are months or days. We just know that the final element is the year, but in this particular case it's not relevant. We'll just assume that they will give us different numbers and it'll be okay. Then what we need to do is to take each element and print it in a way that is more friendly to the eyes. Okay, let's just keep in mind exactly what they want. We will have to say print the examination will start from plus. Remember, if we concatenate using plus, it means that there will be no spaces between each element when we print, whereas if we use the comma, it will automatically add a space, which can make a difference depending on the precise result you want. If you want to create a serial number made up from 3 different sources added together, you will probably want to use a plus sign. But if you want to create a phrase like we're doing now, using a comma might be the better option. It depends on your preference. Okay, the examination will start from, we have a space and a colon. This would be exam_st_date 0. We have a comma, we have a space which will be added by the comma, we have a /, we have the second element on that tuple, exam_st_date, use the brackets for the index, use a comma, we use double quotes, forward slash, double quotes, and the last element, exam st date 2, and we close this. And we'll run it and see what happens. The examination will start from, let me see, this is our result. There we go. The examination will start from colon 11 space forward slash 12 forward slash 2014, which works perfectly. Now let's see what happens if we try to use this, but instead of using the comma, we add the space and we use the addition character, and we manually add this the required spaces. Okay, here we need to delete all the commas. If you want, you can pause the video and try to guess what will happen, and I will execute this in 3, 2, 1. Da-da! Invalid syntax. Oh, I forgot a plus. There we go. Yep. This should work. Now, as you can see, it's throwing an error here. Type error. Can only concatenate string to string, not int or integer to string. What happens is that in this tuple, these values are integers or whole numbers, which you can identify due to the fact that they're numbers. They don't have dots in them, and they do not have quotes, whether single or double, surrounding them. So Python thinks of them as numbers, and numbers can be added with numbers. You can add 2 and 12 and you'll get 14. Logically you can add the space and examination to get the examination as a string, but Python doesn't know how to add 2 and examination, and it just crashes and burns. What we need to do then, we could go back to our comma solution, but in this case what we will do is we will tell Python it's alright, we will take these numbers, but first we will convert them into strings so you can safely deal with them. The way we do that is by using the str function, str exam stdate plus the forward slash plus str exam stdate plus forward slash plus str exam stdate and a double parenthesis. Everything seems to be well. Let's put this here and we have pretty much the same. Oh, we forgot a space, and now we have the same output that we had in our first attempt. Here you can see that the print statement can be divided into 2 lines with no problems. I'm not exactly sure how this works with for loops and such. Let's see. For element in exam st date, we select everything. Pro tip: you can use the tab key to select many lines to indent those lines 4 spaces to the right. Let's see if the result is the same. Yes, for the 3 elements 0, 1, 2, it prints the line. Let's see what happens if we remove the indentation here. Python realizes that since we have a plus sign here, that the line continues and treats all of this as a single line. This makes a difference for when you want to make the program more readable, and in case you don't want to have a huge line going all the way to the right. So this is a possible solution. Let's check what the solution here, which we forgot to do on exercise number 8. Number 9. Click to see the sample solution. Exam date 11. Okay, this is a different way of formatting strings. On a personal level, I prefer to do the commas or the addition signs because I think it makes everything much clearer, but it might be useful to know this syntax as well. Let's try it. I'll be honest with you, I'm not completely familiar with it, but we're all here to learn. The idea of these strings isn't for me to just vomit knowledge or skill, whatever measure of that I have, to you, but I also want to be learning alongside you as well. Now, exam st date. The examination will start. Oh, exam start date. Now we know, and it's the element special. In this case, it's taken as a special character because here we have the corresponding. It's telling Python where it has to take the elements from. So I take them from exam start date. Let's obviously start experimenting, see what happens when we add a new element. We execute. Now we know we need to get all the arguments for the string formatting to have to work properly. We will just copy and paste this here, and now we have pretty much the same result. We can do the same if we should be able to do the same. Let's change the name of the variable, change the type to a list, see if it works. Exam st date. We obviously need to, my bad, sorry, format. A number is required, not list. Dun dun dun. So this is a tuple. number is required instead of a list. So it seems like this works with tuples but not with lists. Okay, Python code editor. It's not a big deal, but it's these little differences between data types and how we can deal with them. You slowly start getting the gist of it. You start improving your reasoning and how to deal with these unexpected errors. If we only know one way to do things, when that way for one reason or another doesn't work, it can get tricky. But if we at least know or remember there was a different way of doing things, we can start searching and our lives will become much easier. Let's keep going then. This was exercise number 9. Let's move on to number 10. Write a Python program that accepts an integer n and computes the value of n plus n times n plus n times n times n. Sample value of n is 5, expected result is 615. Let's see. If it says that it should accept an integer, I would take that as needing for us, the user, to input the value we want. If that's the case, we must go with n equals to input, and we ask the user, please enter a number. Remember, we should always be polite. And then we just print your final number is, and what we want to put here is n plus n times n plus n times n times n. This would throw an error because input, no matter what you enter, input will always take that as a string, and if we try to concatenate strings, it just won't work. Actually, let's try it. Please enter a number. Select here 5. Yeah, can't multiply sequence. This probably means n times n. You can logically multiply the character 5 times 5, which will be 5 times the character 5. You can multiply the phrase yes 3 times, and the final result would be yes, 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 because it's the same string 3 times. But you cannot multiply the word yes by the word yes, which once again makes Python go. Then what we need to do is to turn n into an integer, and the way to do that, we will say that n is equal to int n, which means that Python will take the input that we're asking for here, it will turn it into a number, and then it should print the desired result. This has the problem of what happens if the user enters a name, for example, but for the time being we don't need to deal with that. If you're curious, you can Google Python how to handle exceptions, and it'll show you the method to do that. Let's go here. Please enter a number 5. Your final number is 155. Let's see why. Five plus 125 is 113. We're missing parentheses. Let's see if this. Nope. Let's go back here. N plus n times n plus n times n times n. N plus n times n plus n times n times n. And yet it isn't. $155. Print your final number is. Let's take and only print this part. 155. Let's see what happens if we remove this part. You can just leave it here as a comment. See what happens. 5. Hold on a second. We are here. Sample value of n is 5. 5 plus 25 is 13. 5 plus 25 is 30 plus 125, which is 5 times 5 times 5, is 155, which is the result we've been getting all this time, which seems to mean that there's a typo here. 5 plus 25 plus 125, which is 5 to the power of 3. Let's check what the sample solution says, because maybe there might be something that I didn't quite understand here. Base 10. Okay. The function returns an integer object constructed from a number or string and oh, they were taking it as integers rather than as numbers. I was wrong then. So what we need to do, before we watch their solution, let's try to make our own. This is a weird mix between concatenating and turning to strings. So we can forget about integer here, and solution should be the final number is the n considered on its own as an integer plus n plus n taken as an integer. This one should work fine because n and n are both strings, plus integer n plus n plus n. Let's see if we're on the right track, and there we go. It was that's another thing to keep in mind, that sometimes we will think a problem is wrong or it can't be solved, but really what's happening is that we're not understanding the full context of that problem, which is why it's so important to ask questions when someone tells you to solve a given problem, to make sure that we are giving the solution that is expected. It could happen that our solution is technically right if we think our reasoning, or the reasoning should go this way, but it can turn out that the reasoning, the person asking for the solution, was going that way, and that can be very tricky to solve. So to avoid those kinds of problems, it always pays to make sure that we're understanding clearly what is happening. So here we have it's a more verbose way of doing it, with the string formatting that we saw on the previous exercise, and it prints n1 plus n2 plus n3, which we created in just one line, which again doesn't mean our solution is better or worse, it's just different. Some people might find this confusing, other people might find these as too verbose and say, why waste 3 lines in a program that would be much clearer if all the necessary operations were done into just one line. So this is something that time will give you, and you'll have to come up with your own solutions. One more exercise, number 11. Write a Python program to print the documents of Python built-in functions. I will be honest with you, I have no idea what they mean with this. So this should be something about how to access the syntax, description, and so on of Python's built-in functions. Let's go to our very good friend Mr. Google. Python access syntax of built-in functions, and let's see what we get. Python, oh, built-in instead of built-in, sorry about that. Python built-in functions returns the absolute value of a number. That's true. Yeah, here we have a very handy list of all the functions that come with Python itself, like our good friend print or input, in a very simple, with a very simple explanation. Now, print the documents. Python, let's see. Print the documents of how to print your functions documentation. Print Python built-in function documentation. Oh, we're accessing exactly the same exercise written here, which kind of defeat the purpose of trying to find it out on our own. It's two underscores doc. Let's see. Print abs dot doc and see what happens. Return the absolute value of the argument. Let's try it with print. Print prints the values to a stream or to sys.stdout by default. Optional keywords. So this gives us the access to the documentation for each Python function. I wouldn't recommend this as a way to learn about these functions, at least until you're way more advanced, because it tends to be written for engineers or for professional programmers, and it can be quite cryptic and obscure if you're not familiar with the terminology they're using. Even to this day, I rather not use Python's documentation, and I instead rely on other websites such as w3schools.com, for example, where you can see the same functions. They are explained as well, but with a much clearer syntax, which makes it a lot easier to understand and to make the proper adjustments so that we can get the results we want or need. Let's see, for example, the input function, which we have used quite a bit. Python input function, how it works, an example. Hello plus x, where x is our input. The input function allows user input and the parameters. Here we can see that it only takes a single parameter, which is the prompt, which we have also used quite a lot, and an example, and that's it. This makes it much easier to understand and to apply. If we're not sure how it works, we can just copy this code and paste it and see what happens, and it'll give us a much clearer picture of how this works, at least for the most basic Python functions. The last thing we must do is check their solution, which is here. click me to see the sample solution. Let's close this. Exercise 11. Python docstring. A docstring is a string literal that occurs as the first statement in a model function, class, or method definition. Such a docstring becomes the __doc__ special attribute of that object. In this case, it should be noted we can create this docstring even in our own functions, so that when other people use our code, they can access the doc special attribute and get a description of our function, which can be really useful when we know that our code will be used by others, such as in a professional environment, or when we create a library of our own. Let's see if we can make our own. Python create docstring. Docstrings in Python. Explanation. Okay, here we go. If it fits all in one line, it can be triple quotes and multi-line. There we go. So just for funsies, let's create a function named for funsies that won't take any parameters. We use the triple single quotes. This is just for, wait for it, funsies, and we add the triple single quotes, and we need to give it something to do. Let's just print a blank line. So if we execute for funsies, it will just give us the blank line, and if we print for funsies doc, this is just for, wait for it, funsies. It's that simple. In case in the future you want to do it, this is the way to go. And with that, let's see if there's something else of interest here. No, there doesn't seem to be anything interesting in the solution of this document. So this has been today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did going through these exercises. This is an excellent way for me to get back on track with Python's basics, and I'm really thankful for the chance you are all giving me to improve my skills and hopefully help you improve yours. Thank you very much for joining me. Hopefully I'll see you on Thursday, and happy programming!